welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I kept sipping it anyway. Third shift at the Potomac Nuclear Monitoring Station meant watching screens that rarely changed, tracking radiation levels across the eastern seaboard that stayed boringly normal. I'd been doing this job for 6 years since leaving the Army, and the most exciting thing that ever happened was a false alarm from a medical isotope transport. The Geiger counter's steady tick-tick-tick had become white noise until 3:47 a.m., when it suddenly wasn't steady anymore. Tick-tick-tick-tick, click-tick-click, click-tick-click, click-click. I looked up from the maintenance report I'd been filling out, my pen still hovering over the page. The main display showed a grid of green dots representing monitoring stations across Virginia, Maryland, and DC. They were all normal, all except one. Station 7, downtown Washington, was flashing red. My coffee cup hit the desk with a ceramic clink. Red meant readings above 500 Roentgens per hour. Red meant something was catastrophically wrong. I grabbed the secure phone to call my supervisor, but the line was dead. Not busy, dead. No dial tone, no static, nothing. I tried my cell phone. Same electronic silence. The landline to Station 7 gave me the same void. The metallic taste crept across my tongue as I stared at the screen. That taste meant only one thing. I was already being exposed to radiation. But how? We were 15 miles outside the capital, and our facility was rated for Category 5 nuclear events. Station 7's readings climbed past 1,000 Roentgens per hour, then 2,000. Then the display just showed, error, reading exceeds maximum threshold. My hands trembled as I pulled up the atmospheric model. If something had happened in downtown DC, the fallout pattern would depend on wind direction. Tonight, the wind was blowing southeast at 12 miles per hour, straight toward us. I stood up so fast my chair rolled backward into the wall. That's when I saw it, Juniper's medical ID badge, lying on the floor by my workstation. She must have dropped it when she'd stopped by yesterday evening, excited about her overnight shift at George Washington University Hospital, downtown. She was working downtown tonight. The Geiger counter's clicking was accelerating. Click, 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 click. I ran to the emergency protocols manual, my boots echoing against the concrete floor. The pages felt thin and useless as I flipped through them. Procedures for equipment malfunction, for minor radiation leaks, for communication failures. But nothing for this. Nothing for readings that shattered the instruments. The atmospheric model finished calculating. A red plume stretched from downtown DC southeast across the Potomac, expanding outward like spilled blood. The estimated arrival time at our facility, 24 minutes. I grabbed the facility's emergency radio and switched to the emergency broadcast frequency. Static hissed through the speakers. I tried the military emergency channel. More static. Every frequency was dead air or white noise that made my teeth ache. The metallic taste in my mouth was getting stronger, coating my tongue like I'd been sucking on pennies. My skin felt like it was crawling, tingling with an electric sensation I'd learned to recognize during nuclear response training in the Army. This wasn't my imagination. I was being exposed to radiation right now, through the facility's supposedly impenetrable shielding. I looked at Juniper's badge again. Her photo smiled back at me, the same cocky grin she'd worn since we were kids. She'd been so proud of landing the EMT position at the hospital, talking about how she was finally doing something that mattered. "Going to save lives, Ivan," she'd said. "Just like you did in the army. The smart thing would be to evacuate immediately. Get in my truck, drive inland, put distance between myself and whatever was happening in the capital." The protocols were clear. In case of major radiation event, personnel should evacuate to the designated fallback position 50 miles west. I had the keys in my pocket, a full tank of gas, and the roads were probably still clear. But if I left now, I'd lose any chance of understanding what was happening. The monitoring equipment here was the most advanced on the East Coast. If there were other facilities still operational, they'd need our data to coordinate their response. And if Juniper was still alive somewhere in that chaos, the Geiger counter's clicking had become a constant buzz, like angry insects. I looked at the radiation badge clipped to my shirt. It was already turning yellow. Yellow meant significant exposure. Red meant lethal. 22 minutes until the plume reached us. I had to make a choice: follow evacuation protocols and abandon my post, or stay and try to figure out what was happening. Stay and try to help coordinate whatever response was still possible. Stay and maybe find out if my sister was alive. The atmospheric model updated again. The red plume had grown larger, and now I could see smaller plumes spreading from two other locations, Arlington and Alexandria. This wasn't just one incident. This was multiple events happening simultaneously. My radiation badge was turning orange. I picked up Juniper's ID badge and clipped it to my shirt next to mine. If she was still alive, she'd need help. If she wasn't, well, someone had to witness what was happening here. Someone had to record it. The facility's backup generators kicked in with a low rumble that I felt through the floor. The main power grid had just failed. I was now completely cut off from the outside world, sitting in a hardened monitoring station with the best radiation detection equipment on the East Coast, watching what looked like multiple nuclear events unfold in real time. The smart thing would be to run. Instead, I started documenting everything. Timestamps, radiation readings, atmospheric data, communication failures. If I was going to die here, at least I'd leave a record of what happened. Someone would find it eventually. The Geiger counter's buzz was getting louder, more insistent. My radiation badge was turning red. Outside, I could hear the sound of car engines, people fleeing, if they were smart. But I could also hear something else. A low rumble, like distant thunder, but continuous, like the sound of a city burning. I looked at the screen one more time. Station 7 was offline now, but stations 5, 6, and 8 were all showing massive readings. The capital was gone. The question was, what had taken it? And more importantly, was this accident or attack? The rumbling outside was getting louder. Through the reinforced windows, I could see a glow on the horizon, orange and red, like a sunrise in the wrong direction. 18 minutes until the plume reached us. The first vehicle arrived at 4:23 a.m., a battered Ford pickup truck with its paint blistered and windshield spiderwebbed with cracks. Through the facility's security cameras, I watched 3 people stumble out, their clothes singed and faces streaked with ash. The woman in the lead carried a yellow radiation detector that clicked so rapidly it sounded like static. The facility's airlock hissed as it cycled, and they rushed through the decontamination shower. I met them in the entry chamber, tasting copper on my tongue as my radiation badge glowed deep red. The woman had short dark hair and moved with military precision, her eyes cataloging every detail of the room. She held up a federal ID with a steady hand. Kai Richardson, Emergency Communications Specialist, FEMA Region 3, she said, her voice sandpaper rough from smoke. Are you the duty officer? Ivan Petrov, nuclear engineer. This is my facility. I gestured toward the wall of monitors. What's your situation out there? She studied the screens, her jaw tightening. We've lost contact with 7 major population centers. Not just DC, Baltimore, Norfolk, Richmond. The whole eastern seaboard is going dark. She paused, her finger tracing the radiation readings. These numbers, they're not matching any weapon signature in our database. Behind her, one of the other survivors, a teenage boy with blistered arms wrapped in torn fabric, spoke up. Ma'am, we need to get word to the northern facilities. My dad works at the Delaware plant. If this is spreading, communications are down. I interrupted. I've tried every frequency. Military, emergency services, civilian, everything's dead. Kai pulled out a ruggedized laptop and connected it to our system with practiced efficiency. Not everything. We've got a hardened satellite uplink in the truck. If we can boost the signal through your facility's antenna array. Her fingers flew across the keys, each keystroke deliberate and confident. There. I'm getting handshakes from monitoring stations in Pennsylvania and New York. They're still operational. The Geiger counter's buzz had become a constant drone, punctuated by the sharp clicks of our instruments recalibrating. Outside, I could hear more vehicles arriving, engines straining, tires screeching on asphalt as people fled the radiation zone, seeking shelter at the only hardened facility for miles around. How many people are coming here? I asked, watching the security feed as more vehicles pulled into our parking area. Kai checked her tablet, squinting at the screen. 17 vehicles confirmed, maybe 40 people total. Your facility is the only Category 5 rated shelter within 50 miles. She looked up at me, her expression grim. We need to make a decision. Do we seal the facility and protect who's here? Or do we keep the doors open for more survivors? Before I could answer, the airlock hissed again. This time, a woman in a torn business suit stumbled through, clutching a leather briefcase against her chest like armor. She was older, maybe 45, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of pallor that came from working in windowless government buildings. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her ID. Layla Chun, she gasped, showing us a Department of Energy badge. I need to speak with whoever's in charge immediately. This isn't what you think it is. Kai and I exchanged glances. What do you mean? I asked. Layla looked around the room, her eyes settling on the radiation displays. The numbers were climbing steadily, painting the screens in shades of red that made my skin crawl. The warhead that detonated over DC, it wasn't foreign. It was ours. Experimental. It was being transported when... She trailed off, her face crumpling. Oh God. This is my fault. Transported where? Kai demanded, her voice sharp. From the Nevada test site to the Pantex facility in Texas. We were moving 6 prototype warheads for decommissioning. The transport convoy was supposed to take the southern route, but there was a route change at the last minute. Someone ordered them through the Capitol corridor. I felt ice spread through my veins. 6 warheads. 5 now, Layla whispered. The lead vehicle's containment unit failed somehow. Maybe an accident, maybe something else. But the other transport vehicles are still out there, and after what happened in DC, they're probably trying to get to secure facilities as fast as possible. The facility's emergency klaxon erupted 3 sharp bursts that meant incoming radiation levels were approaching lethal. Through the reinforced windows, I could see the orange glow on the horizon had intensified, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with heat distortion. Ash fell like snow in the security camera feeds. We need to evacuate the outer areas, I said, moving to the control panel. Seal the primary shelter areas. Activate the air filtration systems. Wait, Kai said, her laptop beeping with incoming data. I'm getting reports from the northern monitoring stations. They're detecting radiation signatures moving south on Interstate 95 and west on Interstate 66. Multiple sources. The other transport vehicles, Layla said, her voice barely audible over the klaxon. They're trying to reach secure facilities, but they're spreading contamination along the highway corridors. I looked at the tactical display Kai had pulled up. Red dots crept along the major highway arteries, leaving trails of radiation behind them like infected blood vessels. If they're heading for secure facilities, that means Quantico Marine Base, Kai finished, Fort Belvoir, the Pentagon's alternate sites. They're trying to reach military installations that can handle the warheads safely. But they're contaminating everything along the way, I said. Those highway corridors serve millions of people. The klaxon blared again, then fell silent. Outside, I could hear vehicle engines, some arriving, some departing. People were making their own choices about whether to stay or run. A woman was screaming somewhere in the distance, her voice cutting through the electronic hum of our equipment. We have maybe 30 minutes before the main radiation plume reaches us, I said. After that, we're sealed in until the levels drop enough to safely evacuate, or until we run out of air, Layla added grimly. These facilities aren't designed for long-term occupation. Kai was typing frantically on her laptop, her screen reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights. I'm trying to coordinate with the other facilities, but communications are spotty. Some are reporting they're being approached by military units, not the transport teams, but what looks like cleanup crews. Cleanup crews? I asked. The kind that makes sure there are no witnesses to classified weapons programs, Layla said quietly. The kind that would rather contain the information than contain the radiation. I looked at the survivors streaming into our facility through the security cameras. Families with children, elderly people clutching oxygen tanks, people with pets and whatever belongings they could grab. They were trusting us to keep them safe. But if Layla was right about cleanup crews, we need to make a choice, I said. Do we focus on protecting the people here, or do we try to coordinate with the other facilities to track those remaining warheads? Kai looked up from her laptop, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. The northern facilities are requesting our atmospheric data. They need to know the fallout patterns to coordinate their response. But if we transmit that data, we're also broadcasting our location to anyone monitoring military communications, including the cleanup crews, Layla added. Through the intercom, I could hear voices from the main shelter area, people asking questions, children crying. someone coughing in a way that meant they'd inhaled radioactive particles. The metallic taste in my mouth was getting stronger, coating my tongue like I'd been licking batteries. I could feel the familiar tingling sensation spreading across my skin like fire ants. My radiation badge was now a deep red that was almost black. I had maybe 6 hours before the exposure became irreversible. But if we could coordinate the response, if we could track those remaining warheads and prevent more detonations, there's something else, Kai said, her voice barely above a whisper. The communication intercepts I'm getting, some of them are talking about a cleansing protocol. Like this wasn't an accident. Like someone wanted those warheads to detonate in populated areas. I stared at the display showing the spreading radiation plumes. 6 warheads, 1 already detonated, 5 still moving along highways toward major population centers. And somewhere out there, cleanup crews were making sure there would be no witnesses to what had really happened. The emergency lighting flickered as the power grid continued to fail. Through the reinforced windows, I could see the orange glow was spreading, and I could hear the distant sound of helicopters, too many of them, moving too fast for a normal disaster response. "Ivan," Kai said, her eyes meeting mine. "Your sister, the hospital where she works. It's directly in the path of the convoy heading toward Quantico." I looked at Juniper's ID badge, still clipped to my shirt. The plastic was warm against my chest, and I could feel the weight of the decision settling on my shoulders like lead blankets. The choice was no longer about duty versus self-preservation. It was about whether I could live with myself if I didn't try to warn her. "Send the data," I said. "All of it. Every facility, every emergency frequency we can reach. If there are cleanup crews listening, so be it." Kai nodded and began typing. "This is going to put a target on our backs. Then we better be ready for them," I said, turning to the weapon locker I'd hoped never to open. The key felt cold in my fingers. Because if they're willing to let 5 more warheads loose just to cover up one accident, they're not going to let witnesses survive. The facility's emergency lighting flickered again, casting long shadows across the monitoring equipment. Outside, the orange glow was spreading like a malignant sunrise, and I could hear the distant sound of helicopters, too many of them, moving too fast for a normal disaster response. The cleanup crews were coming. The data transmission took 11 minutes to complete. 11 minutes of watching the progress bar crawl across Kai's screen while the Geiger counter's buzz grew louder and the metallic taste in my mouth intensified. My radiation badge had darkened to deep crimson, and I could feel the familiar tingling sensation spreading across my exposed skin like thousands of tiny needles. "It's done," Kai said, her voice hoarse from the contaminated air. "Every monitoring station from Maine to Georgia has our atmospheric data now. They'll know exactly where those warheads are heading. And so will the cleanup crews," Layla added from her position by the window. She'd been watching the horizon for the past hour, her face pressed against the reinforced glass. Steam from her breath fogged the surface in irregular patterns. "They're coming. I can see the lights." I moved to the window beside her. In the distance, a line of vehicles moved along the access road, not the desperate, erratic movement of refugees, but the steady, purposeful advance of a military convoy. Their headlights cut through the orange-tinged air in perfect formation, and I could make out the angular shapes of armored vehicles between the civilian trucks. The lead vehicle's searchlight swept back and forth across the contaminated landscape like a mechanical eye. "How many?" I asked, my breath creating condensation on the glass. 12 vehicles. Maybe more behind them. Layla's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she gripped the window frame. The skin on her knuckles was already showing the telltale redness of radiation exposure. Those aren't regular military units. The lead vehicle is a mobile command center. The others... She squinted through the heat-distorted air. Hazmat response, probably, but not the kind that saves people. The facility's communication array crackled to life with a burst of static. A voice, calm and professional, filled the control room. Nuclear Monitoring Facility Designation NM-7. This is Colonel Marcus Webb, Special Weapons Division. We are approaching your location for mandatory decontamination and personnel evacuation. Please prepare for immediate departure. I looked at Kai, who was already pulling up the facility's security protocols on her laptop. Her fingers moved across the keys with practiced efficiency, but I could see the tremor in her hands. Whether from fear or radiation exposure, I couldn't tell. They're not asking, she said quietly. They're ordering. What's the standard procedure for this situation? I asked Layla, though the copper taste in my mouth was making it hard to form words clearly. She turned from the window, her face pale and drawn. Small red spots had appeared on her cheeks, classic signs of acute radiation exposure. There is no standard procedure. These facilities are designed to be autonomous during emergencies. The only time outside military units take control is when... She paused, her throat working as she swallowed hard. When there's been a security breach that requires elimination. The radio crackled again, the transmission cutting through the facility's air filtration system with mechanical precision. NM-7. Acknowledge our transmission. We have authorization to secure this facility under Emergency Protocol 77 Alpha. You have 10 minutes to prepare for evacuation. I keyed the microphone, my voice strained. Colonel Webb, this is Ivan Petrov, duty officer. We have 43 civilians taking shelter here. Our radiation levels are approaching critical. Evacuation at this time would be... Mr. Petrov, you are not authorized to retain civilian personnel at a classified facility during a national security incident. Prepare them for immediate transport to designated safe zones. The transmission cut off with a sharp click. I released the microphone key and looked at Layla, noting how her hands had developed the same tremor that was affecting all of us. What's Protocol 77 Alpha? Compartmentalization, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the facility's humming ventilation system. It means they're going to separate everyone, process them individually, and determine who knows what. Anyone who knows too much about the weapons program. She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Through the security cameras, I could see the civilians in the main shelter area. A mother was reading a picture book to her 2 young children, her voice barely audible over the facility's mechanical systems. The book's pages were already yellowed from radiation exposure. An elderly man sat in a wheelchair, his oxygen tank beside him, while his wife held his hand with fingers that showed the same red blotching we all had. They trusted us to keep them safe. They had no idea what was coming. There's something else, Kai said, her fingers flying across the keyboard despite the tremor in her hands. I'm intercepting military communications. They're not just coming here. They're moving on all the facilities that received our data transmission. All of them. The question came out as a croak. Every single one. Simultaneous operations across 7 states. She looked up at me, her eyes watering from the contaminated air. This isn't disaster response. This is containment. I moved to the classified communications terminal, the red phone that connected directly to the National Emergency Response Network. I'd never used it before, but I'd been trained on the protocols. The handset felt heavier than it should have, and the plastic was warm against my ear. The line was supposed to be secure, routed through hardened military satellites that could survive almost anything. The phone rang once before someone answered. Emergency Response Network, this is General Patricia Hayes. Identify yourself. General Hayes, this is Ivan Petrov, duty officer at Nuclear Monitoring Facility NM7. I need to report a security breach in the experimental weapons transport program. My voice was getting weaker, the radiation exposure making my throat feel like sandpaper. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her tone was sharp and cold. Mr. Petrov, you are not authorized to discuss classified programs on this line. Terminate this call immediately. General, with respect, I have documentation that 6 experimental warheads were being transported when 1 detonated over Washington, D.C. The remaining 5 are still in transit, spreading contamination along major highway corridors. This is not a foreign attack. This is a domestic incident that requires immediate. The line went dead with a sharp click that echoed in my ears. I stared at the phone, my mind racing through the implications. The highest-ranking emergency response officer in the country had just cut me off. Either she didn't know about the weapons program, or she was part of the cover-up. Neither option offered much hope. Ivan, Kai said, her voice tight with urgency. I'm picking up radio chatter. The convoy is 3 minutes out, and they're not alone. I'm detecting helicopter signatures, 4 aircraft, military configuration. Apache attack helicopters. Through the facility's external speakers, I could hear the distant thrum of rotor blades cutting through the contaminated air. The sound was getting closer, and I could see searchlights sweeping across the orange-hazed landscape, turning the radioactive particles into a pulsing, hellish snowfall. We need to get everyone to the deepest level, I said, moving to the facility's emergency controls. Each step sent waves of nausea through me as the radiation worked its way deeper into my system. Lock down all external access points. Activate the emergency protocols. That won't stop them, Layla said, her voice getting weaker. They have override codes. They can open any door in this facility. Then we need to get the civilians out before they arrive. Out where? Kai demanded, coughing up blood-flecked spittle. The radiation levels outside are lethal. Anyone who leaves this facility will be dead within hours. I looked at the atmospheric readings on the main display. She was right. The contamination had spread in a perfect circle around the facility, creating a dead zone that stretched for miles in every direction. The numbers were climbing steadily, painting the screens in shades of red that made my eyes water and burn. There's another option, Layla said quietly, her words slurred from the nausea. The underground transport tunnel. It connects to the old subway system that was never completed. It's shielded, and it leads to a secondary facility about 12 miles north. That tunnel was sealed years ago, I said, my voice hoarse. The radiation shielding is compromised. Not all of it. The first 2 miles are still intact. She pulled a folded blueprint from her briefcase with trembling hands, spreading it on the control console. The paper was already yellowing from exposure. I helped design the original specifications. If we can get the civilians to the junction point, they can follow the old subway lines to the surface outside the contamination zone. I studied the blueprint, squinting as my vision blurred from the radiation effects. The tunnel was narrow, designed for automated transport vehicles, not people. And the junction point was beyond the facility's protective barriers. The radiation exposure would be significant, less than staying here when the cleanup crews arrive, Layla said, blood trickling from her nose. The facility's proximity alarms began screaming, a piercing wail that cut through the mechanical hum of the ventilation system. Through the security cameras, I could see the convoy had reached the outer perimeter. The lead vehicle was indeed a mobile command center. Its antenna arrays extended like mechanical spiders against the orange sky. Behind it, the other vehicles were deploying in a perfect tactical formation, their searchlights creating overlapping fields of harsh white light. Kai, can you guide the civilians to the tunnel entrance? I asked, my words coming out in gasps. What about you? She was holding onto the console now, her legs shaking from the radiation exposure. I need to delay the cleanup crews. Give you time to get everyone clear. I moved to the facility's emergency lockdown controls, each step feeling like I was walking through thick mud. Once I activate this, the facility goes into full security mode. All external communications are cut, all access points are sealed, and the internal systems switch to autonomous operation. That's a one-way decision, Layla said, wiping blood from her nose with the back of her hand. Once you activate lockdown, there's no way to reverse it from inside the facility. Then I better make it count. Through the external speakers, I could hear the sound of heavy boots on concrete and the whine of cutting tools. The cleanup crews were already at the main entrance, their equipment slicing through the facility's outer doors with the precision of a surgical team. Sparks cascaded down like radioactive rain. Go, I said to Kai. Get them out of here. She nodded and ran toward the main shelter area, her footsteps echoing in the corridor. I could hear her voice over the intercom, calm and professional, telling the civilians they were being moved to a safer location. Most of them believed her. They had no choice. I turned to Layla. You're going with them. No, I'm staying here. She pulled a data drive from her briefcase and handed it to me. This contains everything. The real transport logs, the route changes, the communications between the weapons program and the transport teams, and the names of everyone who authorized this operation. I looked at the drive. It was small, no bigger than my thumb, but it contained enough information to bring down the entire program. Why are you giving this to me? Because you're the only one who can get it to the right people. And because, she paused, her voice catching, because I helped design those warheads. I knew they were being transported through populated areas, and I didn't speak up. This is my fault. The facility's main entrance alarms began blaring. The cleanup crews had breached the outer security barriers and were moving through the decontamination chambers. I could see them on the security cameras, figures in full hazmat suits, their equipment designed not to protect them from radiation but to contain it. Ivan, Kai's voice came over the intercom. We're at the tunnel entrance. The radiation shielding is holding, but we need to move fast. The levels are climbing. I looked at the lockdown controls. Once I activated them, the facility would become a sealed tomb. The cleanup crews would be trapped inside with me, But so would anyone who didn't make it to the tunnel in time. Layla, last chance. Go with them. She shook her head. I'm done running. Someone needs to face what we've done. I placed my hand on the lockdown activation switch. Through the security cameras, I could see the cleanup crews moving through the facility's corridors, their movements efficient and deadly. They would reach the control room in less than 5 minutes. Kai, how many civilians are still in the facility? 3. An elderly man who can't walk and his wife. They're helping him to the tunnel entrance now. I waited, watching the security feed. The elderly man was moving slowly, his wife supporting him with each step. Behind them, I could see the glow of the cleanup crew's equipment reflecting off the corridor walls. Clear! Kai's voice came over the intercom. Everyone's in the tunnel. I flipped the lockdown switch. The facility's emergency lighting turned red, and steel barriers slammed down over every external opening. The ventilation system switched to internal recycling mode, and the communication arrays retracted into their armored housings. We were sealed in. The cleanup crews were trapped with us. Layla was standing at the window, watching the contaminated landscape. It's beautiful in a way, she said quietly. Like a sunrise that will never end. I looked at the data drive in my hand. Somewhere in the tunnel system, 43 civilians were following Kai towards safety. And somewhere out there, 5 more warheads were still moving toward populated areas, spreading death with every mile they traveled. The cleanup crews had reached the main corridor. Through the security cameras, I could see them trying to override the lockdown protocols, their equipment sparking as it met the facility's hardened defenses. They'll get through eventually, I said. Eventually isn't now, Layla replied. And now is all we have. I looked at the atmospheric readings. The radiation levels were climbing steadily, painting the screens in shades of red that made my eyes water. The metallic taste in my mouth was stronger now, coating my tongue like liquid copper. My radiation badge was black. The cleanup crews were almost through the corridor barriers. I could hear their equipment cutting through the reinforced steel, each spark a countdown to our final confrontation. I thought about Juniper somewhere in the contaminated wasteland between here and the capital. I thought about the 5 warheads still spreading their poison across the highways. And I thought about the data drive in my hand, the evidence that could stop this madness if it ever reached the right people. The barriers exploded inward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The cleanup crews poured through the breach, their weapons raised and their faces hidden behind reflective visors. Ivan Petrov, their leader, called out, his voice distorted by the hazmat suit's communication system. You are under arrest for violating the National Security Act. Surrender the classified materials immediately. I looked at the data drive one more time, then at Layla. She nodded. Come and take them, I said. The final confrontation was about to begin. The first gunshot shattered the control room's main display in a cascade of sparks and broken glass. I dove behind the console as the cleanup crew's leader, his hazmat suit bearing the insignia of a major, advanced through the smoke-filled breach. The acrid smell of burning electronics mixed with the metallic tang of radiation exposure that coated my throat like liquid copper. Steam hissed from severed coolant lines, and the facility's Geiger counters screamed in a cacophony of electronic panic. Petrov, last warning. Major's voice crackled through his suit's external speakers, distorted by the static discharge from the facility's failing electrical systems. Drop the drive and surrender. I pressed myself against the concrete wall, feeling the vibrations from the facility's emergency generators as they struggled to maintain power. The radiation badge on my chest had gone completely black, and the familiar tingling sensation had evolved into sharp, stabbing pains that shot through my nervous system like electrical current. My vision was starting to blur at the edges, classic signs of acute radiation syndrome entering its second stage. "Layla!" I called out, but received no response. Through the haze of smoke and steam, I could see her slumped against the window, blood trickling from her nose and ears. Her skin had taken on the waxy, translucent quality that meant her body was shutting down, cell by cell. The data drive felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my trembling hand. Everything, the transport routes, the authorization codes, the names of everyone who had signed off on moving experimental warheads through populated areas, was contained in this small piece of plastic and silicon. If it died with me, the cover-up would be complete. My radio crackled to life with Kai's voice, weak and distorted by the concrete and lead shielding of the tunnel system. "Ivan, second convoy." They found the tunnel entrance, cutting through the emergency doors with plasma torches. The words sent ice through my veins. The cleanup crews weren't just containing our facility. They were systematically eliminating every witness. 43 civilians, including the elderly man who couldn't walk and his wife who had refused to leave him, were trapped in a tunnel system that was supposed to be their salvation. How long until they breached the doors? I gasped into the radio, my voice barely audible over the sound of the Major's team systematically destroying equipment in the adjacent rooms. 10 minutes? Maybe less. We can hear the torches cutting through the reinforced steel. Sparks are falling like rain. I looked at the facility's emergency communication array, the hardened military satellite link that was designed to survive nuclear attack. The display showed active connections to 11 monitoring stations across the eastern seaboard, with the 12th connection flashing red as operators at the main facility went offline. 11 chances to get the information out before our location joined that list. "Petrov!" The Major's voice boomed through the breach. "Closer now. We know about the data transmission to the monitoring stations. Those facilities are being secured as we speak. Your information will never reach the outside world." I pressed my back against the concrete wall, feeling the vibrations from the facility's backup generators as they struggled to maintain power under the electrical damage. Through the smoke and steam, I could see Layla slumped against the radiation-cracked window, blood seeping from her nose and ears in dark rivulets. Her breathing was shallow, labored, each exhale visible in the cold air that was seeping in through the compromised ventilation system. "What kind of relocation?" I called back, knowing the answer but needing to hear him say it. "Decontamination processing. Standard protocol for civilian radiation exposure in classified incidents." Through the facility's security cameras, I could see the perimeter beyond our walls. The original military convoy had been reinforced by a second group of vehicles, unmarked white vans with biohazard symbols stenciled on their sides. But these weren't medical transports. The windows were too small, reinforced with lead-lined glass, and the exhaust systems were designed with filtration normally used for hazardous waste disposal. Mobile crematoriums, the kind used when evidence needed to disappear completely. "Ivan!" Kai's voice came through the radio again, weaker now, distorted by fear and the interference from the tunnel's damaged communications relay. "I can see they're cutting equipment through the door. Orange light. The steel is starting to glow. We don't have much time." I stared at the communication array, then at the data drive clutched in my trembling hand. The upload to the monitoring stations would take at least 4 minutes to complete, time I didn't have. But the information was meaningless unless someone could act on it. And if the Major was telling the truth, everyone who might have acted was being systematically eliminated. But there was another protocol, one that Layla had mentioned during our initial security briefing, the emergency media release system that bypassed the regular command structure and went directly to major news networks. It was supposed to be used only in cases where the regular channels of communication had been compromised by foreign attack or domestic terrorism. This qualified on both counts. My fingers moved across the keyboard, each keystroke sending waves of nausea through my radiation poison system. The facility's lights flickered with each power fluctuation, casting shifting shadows across the debris-strewn floor. The emergency media protocol required dual authorization. 2 separate codes entered simultaneously by personnel with Level 7 clearance. I had one code. Layla had the other. I crawled across the glass-covered floor toward her motionless form, my hands leaving bloody prints on the concrete. The Major's footsteps echoed in the corridor, accompanied by the methodical sounds of his team destroying equipment and sealing access points. They were being thorough, professional, eliminating every possible avenue of information escape. "Layla," I whispered, shaking her shoulder. Her radiation suit was torn, the fabric singed and melted in places where the exposure had been most severe. "I need your authorization code for the media protocol." Her eyes fluttered open, pupils dilated and bloodshot. "What?" "Emergency media release. Your clearance code." She tried to speak, but her voice was barely audible over the sound of steam hissing from ruptured pipes. 7 Delta 99. 7 Delta 99. I repeated, burning the sequence into my memory. "Got it." Her hand gripped mine with surprising strength for someone so close to death. "The transport manifest. I saw it in the classified files. They're not just covering up the Washington incident." "What do you mean?" Her voice was fading, each word a struggle. "The second warhead. It's not being moved to a safe location. They're bringing it here." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Here? To this facility? Complete destruction of evidence. Make it look like reactor failure. No witnesses. No proof." My mind raced through the implications. The second experimental warhead wasn't being transported to safety. It was being brought to our location to destroy everything within a 20-mile radius. When it detonated, it would vaporize the facility, the tunnel system, and everyone in it. The official story would be that our nuclear monitoring station suffered a catastrophic reactor malfunction, and any evidence of the weapons program would be atomized along with us. "How long?" I asked, but Layla's eyes had closed again, her breathing shallow and irregular. Through the facility's external radiation sensors, I could detect the approaching signature. The transport was still 12 miles out, but moving fast along the contaminated highway corridor. The readings were massive, easily 3 times the radiation signature of the warhead that had detonated over Washington. A city killer being delivered to complete the cover-up. I made it back to the communication console and began entering the authorization codes. The system demanded biometric verification, palm prints and retinal scans from both authorized personnel. I pressed my hand against the scanner, wincing as the radiation burns on my palm made contact with the glass surface. "Layla," I called out, I need your biometrics. She didn't respond. Her chest was barely moving, and the blood from her nose had formed a dark pool on the concrete floor. I would have to drag her to the scanner, assuming she was still alive enough to register. The major's voice echoed through the facility. Petrov, we've detected the activation of classified communication protocols. Cease all transmissions immediately. I looked at the authorization screen. Without Layla's biometrics, the system would lock me out permanently. But there was another way, an emergency override that required a different kind of authorization. The kind that came from the highest levels of government. The red phone. I picked up the secure handset and dialed the emergency number that connected directly to the situation room. The line rang 3 times before someone answered. This is General Hayes. General, this is Ivan Petrov at Facility NM7. I need to invoke the press protocol under Emergency Authorization 77 Delta 9. Mr. Petrov, you do not have authorization to. General, a second experimental warhead is being transported to my location for the purpose of destroying evidence. Civilian casualties will number in the hundreds of thousands. This is a direct threat to national security. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different, tired and defeated. Mr. Petrov, I want you to understand something. This conversation is being recorded. Your accusations constitute treason under the National Security Act, and your participation in this cover-up constitutes mass murder under any law you care to name. Another pause. What do you want? Your authorization code for the press protocol. The second warhead detonates in less than 30 minutes. This is your chance to stop it before it reaches a populated area. I can't do that. You can, and you will. Because when this is over, when the truth comes out, you'll be able to say you tried to stop it. The line was quiet except for the sound of breathing and the distant hum of secure communications equipment. Finally, she spoke. Alpha Charlie 77 Tango. I entered the code into the system. The screen flashed green, and the press protocol activated. Within seconds, the facility's entire database, including the data drive's contents, began uploading to a secure server managed by the Associated Press. The transfer rate was slow, hampered by the facility's damaged communication systems, but it was working. Upload initiated, I said into the radio. Kai, can you hear me? Barely. They're cutting through the tunnel door. Maybe 2 minutes. Listen to me carefully. The second warhead is heading for our location. You need to get everyone out of the tunnel system immediately. Head for the surface access point at Junction 77. It's outside the initial blast radius. We can't. The elderly man, he can't make it that far. I looked at the upload progress bar. 30% complete. The information was getting out, but it would take another 2 minutes to finish. 2 minutes we didn't have. Kai, leave him. What? You heard me. Leave him and his wife. Get the others to safety. I can't do that. You can and you will. 41 lives versus 2. Make the choice. The line went dead. I stared at the radio, knowing that I had just ordered someone to abandon helpless civilians to save others. The kind of choice that would haunt her for the rest of her life, however long that might be. The major's voice boomed through the facility. Petrov, we're detecting an active data transmission. Terminate it immediately or we'll blow the communication array. I looked at the progress bar. 50% complete. The upload was reaching the critical threshold where enough information would survive even if the transmission was interrupted. But 50% might not be enough to expose the full scope of the conspiracy. Through the facility's seismic sensors, I could detect the approaching transport vehicle. The radiation signature was massive, easily 3 times the size of the warhead that had detonated over the capital. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a city killer designed to erase everything within a 20-mile radius. 12 minutes to impact. Ivan. Kai's voice crackled through the radio. We're at Junction 77. The access door is sealed. Use the emergency explosives in the maintenance kit. Red handle, twist counterclockwise. I can't see. Radiation exposure. Everything's blurry. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of every decision I'd made since this crisis began. The civilians were going to die because I'd chosen to upload the data instead of helping them escape. The cleanup crews were going to execute everyone who had seen the evidence. And in 12 minutes, a second warhead would vaporize the entire area, completing the cover-up. But the data was getting out. 70% complete now, with enough information already transmitted to expose the weapons program and the people responsible for it. The world would know what happened here, even if none of us survived to see it. The Major appeared in the doorway, his weapon trained on me. Step away from the console, Mr. Petrov. No, I will shoot you, then shoot me. But the upload continues until it's complete. He squeezed the trigger. The bullet caught me in the shoulder, spinning me around and sending me crashing into the communication console. Pain exploded through my arm, but my hand remained on the keyboard. 80% complete. Next shot goes through your head, the Major said, advancing into the room. Unless you shut down the transmission. I looked at him through the haze of pain and radiation sickness. His hazmat suit was pristine, his movements efficient and professional. He was following orders, just like I had been until an hour ago. The difference was that his orders came from people who valued secrecy over human life. "What's your name, Major?" I asked. "That's not relevant. It is to me. I want to know the name of the man who's going to execute me for trying to save lives." He hesitated. "Major David Chen." "You have children, Major Chen?" "2 daughters." "Then you understand why I can't stop this transmission." The upload progress bar reached 90%. Through the facility's external sensors, I could see the transport vehicle approaching the outer perimeter. The radiation signature was so intense that it was overwhelming the detection equipment, painting the screens in solid red. 8 minutes to impact. "Major Chan," I said, my voice weak from blood loss and radiation exposure. "In 8 minutes, that warhead is going to detonate. The blast radius will extend well beyond this facility. If you have family anywhere within 50 miles of here, they're going to die unless you help me stop this. The transport is under strict security protocol. It can't be stopped. It can. The authorization codes are in the data I'm transmitting. Once this upload completes, those codes will be in the hands of people who can use them." 95% complete. "Ivan." Kai's voice came through the radio, barely audible through the static. "We're out. All of us. The elderly couple. They made it." Relief flooded through me despite the pain and nausea. 43 civilians had escaped the tunnel system and were now outside the blast radius. Whatever happened next, they would survive to tell their story. "Major Chan," I said, looking directly at him, "your orders were to contain this situation. But containing it now means stopping that warhead. Are you going to follow your orders? Or are you going to let thousands of people die to protect a lie? The upload progress bar reached 98%. Major Chen lowered his weapon. What do you need me to do? Help me complete this transmission. Then we call the transport team and give them the abort codes. 99% complete. Through the facility's communication array, I could hear the transport team's radio chatter. They were 6 minutes out and maintaining course. The driver was complaining about the radiation levels, but his orders were clear. Deliver the package to the coordinates, activate the timer, and evacuate to minimum safe distance. The upload progress bar reached 100%. Transmission complete, I said, my voice hoarse with relief. The information is out there. Now we stop that warhead. Major Chun moved to the communication console and activated the military emergency channel. Transport 77 Alpha, this is Major Chun. Authorization code Delta Charlie 99. You are ordered to abort your mission and return to base immediately. Major Chun, this is Transport 77 Alpha. We cannot abort. Orders come directly from General Hayes. General Hayes has been relieved of command. New orders are to abort and return to base. There was a long pause. Major, we need confirmation of that order from command authority. I looked at the secure phone. General Hayes was still on the line, had been listening to everything. General, I said into the handset. It's over. The information is public. Stop the transport. Her voice was barely a whisper. Transport 77 Alpha, this is General Hayes. Abort your mission. Return to base immediately. Copy that, General. Aborting mission and returning to base. Through the facility's external sensors, I watched the transport vehicle slow, then stop, then begin turning around. The radiation signature began moving away from our location, growing smaller with each passing minute. I slumped against the console, my body finally succumbing to the radiation exposure and blood loss. Major Chun was speaking into his radio, calling for medical evacuation, but his voice seemed to be coming from very far away. Kai, I said into the radio, it's over. The warhead is turning back. You're safe. What about you? I looked at my radiation badge, at the blood on my hands, at the readings on the atmospheric sensors. I'm not going to make it out of here. We can come back for you. No, the radiation levels are too high, but the information got out. The world will know what happened here. Through the facility's damaged windows, I could see the first hints of dawn breaking through the contaminated haze. The orange glow was fading, replaced by the natural light of a new day. It was beautiful in its way. Major Chun was kneeling beside me, his medical kit open. Hang on, Mr. Petrov. Evacuation is en route. Too late for that, I said, my voice getting weaker. But not too late for the truth. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of helicopters approaching. Medical evacuation, not attack helicopters. The crisis was over, but the aftermath was just beginning. The upload had worked. The world would know about the experimental warheads, about the cover-up, about the people who had been willing to sacrifice thousands of lives to protect a secret. Justice would be served, even if I wouldn't be around to see it. In the distance, I could hear Kai's voice on the radio, coordinating with the medical teams. 43 civilians were safe. The second warhead was returning to base. The information was in the hands of people who could act on it. The mission was complete. The medical helicopter's rotors cut through the contaminated air like thunder, but I knew it was already too late. My radiation badge had turned completely black 3 hours ago, and the metallic taste in my mouth had evolved into something that felt like chewing on copper wire dipped in battery acid. Through the facility's cracked windows, I watched the bird land in the designated safe zone, 2 miles from our position, the closest they could get without exposing the crew to lethal radiation levels. Steam rose from the helicopter's metal surfaces as radioactive particles condensed on the cooler metal. "Ivan, can you hear me?" Kai's voice crackled through the radio, distorted by interference from the facility's damaged communication array. "The medical team is setting up a decontamination station. They're saying 20 minutes to have the equipment ready." I looked at the atmospheric radiation sensor, 3,847 Roentgens per hour. 20 minutes of exposure at that level would kill anyone not wearing a full hazmat suit. The medical team couldn't reach me, and I couldn't reach them. The mathematics of radiation exposure were as unforgiving as gravity. My skin was already showing the telltale signs of radiation poisoning. Dark patches spreading across my arms like spilled ink, and my fingernails were beginning to separate from the nail beds. "Kai, listen to me carefully," I said into the radio, my voice hoarse from the chemical burns in my throat. "There's something else. Something Layla told me before she died." Her body was slumped against the radiation-cracked window, skin waxy and translucent like old parchment. The blood from her nose had pooled on the concrete floor, forming a dark stain that seemed to absorb the facility's emergency lighting. Her breathing had stopped 47 minutes ago, but her final words had revealed a truth that changed everything. The second warhead wasn't being transported to safety. It was being brought here to our facility to complete the cover-up. The timer on her radiation badge was still clicking weakly, counting down the final minutes of her body's cellular destruction. "What are you talking about?" Kai's voice was strained, exhausted from leading the civilian evacuation through the tunnel system. "The second experimental warhead is not being moved to a secure location. They're bringing it here to destroy all evidence of the weapons program. When it detonates, it'll vaporize everything within a 20-mile radius." The line went silent except for the static of damaged electronics. Through the facility's seismic sensors, I could detect the approaching transport signature, a rhythmic vibration that translated through the concrete foundation like a massive heartbeat. The readings were massive, easily 3 times the radiation output of the device that had detonated over the capital. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a city killer designed to erase every trace of what had happened here. The transport's engines were straining under the weight of the shielded cargo, creating a distinctive harmonic frequency that registered on our underground monitoring equipment. "How long?" Kai asked, her voice barely audible. I checked the transport's projected arrival time based on the seismic readings. 18 minutes. Maybe less if they're pushing the convoy hard. The civilians in the tunnel system are dead if they stay there. The blast radius will extend well beyond the emergency bunkers. You need to get them to the surface access point at Junction 77 immediately. "Ivan, there's a problem. The elderly man, Mr. Patterson, he can't make it that far. His legs gave out during the evacuation, and his wife won't leave him. We'd have to carry him, and that would slow down the entire group." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. 43 civilians had made it to the tunnel system, including 7 children under the age of 10. The mathematics were brutal. If they stayed together, the transport would arrive before they could reach safety. If they left the elderly couple behind, 41 people would survive. Kai, you need to make a choice. Don't say it. Leave them. Get the others to safety. I can't do that. You can and you will. 41 lives versus 2. This is what command decisions look like. The radio went silent. I stared at the atmospheric readings, watching the radiation levels continue to climb as contaminated air circulated through the facility's damaged ventilation system. My vision was starting to blur at the edges, classic symptoms of acute radiation syndrome entering its final stage. But there was still something I could do. Something Layla had mentioned during our initial security briefing. The emergency abort protocol for weapons transport. Every experimental warhead had a remote deactivation system that could be triggered from authorized monitoring stations. The codes were classified at the highest levels, but they were stored in the facility's secure database. I pulled up the transport manifest on my terminal, scrolling through the technical specifications until I found what I was looking for. Device serial number XM47 Alpha. Remote abort frequency 247.6 MHz. Authorization required from 2 separate level 9 clearance holders. I had level 7 clearance. Layla had possessed level 9. But she was dead, and her authorization codes had died with her. Unless I crawled across the debris-strewn floor to where her body lay against the window. Her security badge was still clipped to her radiation suit, the magnetic stripe intact despite the exposure. If the badge reader was still functional, I might be able to access her authorization codes through the facility's emergency protocol system. Ivan, Kai's voice burst through the radio. We're moving. Left Mr. Patterson and his wife in the tunnel with emergency supplies. The rest of us are heading for Junction 77. Relief flooded through me despite the nausea and pain. 41 people would survive. The elderly couple would die, but their sacrifice would save dozens of others, including the children. It was the right choice, even if it would haunt Kai for the rest of her life. I dragged Layla's body to the security console, her radiation suit leaving a dark streak on the concrete. The badge reader was damaged but still functional. Its red light flickered weakly as I swiped her card through the slot. The screen displayed her authorization level. Level 9, all protocols accessible. Authorization accepted, I said aloud, my voice echoing in the empty control room. Initiating emergency abort sequence for transport XM47 Alpha. The system demanded dual authorization. 2 separate codes entered simultaneously. I had my level 7 access, but I needed a second level 9 code to complete the abort sequence. Layla's badge gave me access to the system, but it couldn't provide the second authorization required to stop the transport. I stared at the screen, my radiation-poisoned brain struggling to process the problem. The transport was 14 minutes out. The abort sequence required 2 living, breathing human beings to input their codes simultaneously. I had 1 dead body and my own rapidly failing physical condition. But there was another option. The facility's emergency communication array included a secure line to the Pentagon's nuclear emergency response team. If I could reach someone with the appropriate clearance level, they might be able to provide the second authorization code. I picked up the red phone and dialed the emergency number. The line rang twice before a voice answered, "Nuclear emergency response. This is General Hayes." "General, this is Ivan Petrov at monitoring facility NM7. I need immediate authorization to abort transport 47 Alpha. Mr. Petrov, you do not have authority to interfere with classified weapons transport. General, that transport is carrying an experimental warhead to my location for the purpose of destroying evidence. Civilian casualties will number in the hundreds of thousands if it detonates. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different, tired, defeated. Mr. Petrov, I want you to understand something. This conversation is being recorded. Your accusations constitute treason under the National Security Act, and your participation in this cover-up constitutes mass murder under any law you care to name. Another pause. What do you want? Your authorization code for the emergency abort protocol. The transport reaches my location in 12 minutes. This is your chance to stop it before it detonates. I can't do that. You can. And you will. Because when this is over, when the truth comes out, you'll be able to say you tried to prevent a massacre. The line was quiet except for the hum of secure communications equipment. Through the facility's external sensors, I could see the transport convoy approaching along the contaminated highway. 3 military vehicles, moving fast through the radiation zone with complete disregard for safety protocols. General, I said, my voice growing weaker. I uploaded the complete weapons program database to the Associated Press 47 minutes ago. The information is already public. The cover-up has failed. All you can do now is minimize the casualties. You did what? Everything. The transport routes, the authorization codes, the names of everyone who signed off on moving experimental warheads through populated areas. It's all public record now. There was a long silence. Then, Alpha Charlie 77 Tango. I entered the authorization code into the abort protocol system. The screen flashed green, and the emergency transmission began broadcasting on the transport's command frequency. Transport XM 47 Alpha. This is Facility NM 7 with abort authorization Alpha Charlie 77 Tango. You are ordered to cease movement and await further instructions. The radio crackled with the transport team's response. Facility NM 7. This is Transport XM 47 Alpha. We cannot comply with abort order. Our instructions come directly from the Pentagon. Transport XM 47 Alpha. This is General Hayes. I am ordering you to abort your mission and return to base immediately. General Hayes, we need confirmation of that order from command authority. I looked at the radiation readings on my atmospheric sensor. The transport was now close enough that its cargo was registering on our detection equipment. A massive signature that dwarfed anything I'd ever seen. The device wasn't just designed to destroy evidence. It was built to sterilize the entire area, ensuring that no trace of the weapons program would survive. General, I said into the red phone, confirm the abort order. It's over. Her voice was barely a whisper. Transport XM 47 Alpha. This is General Hayes. Abort your mission. Return to base immediately. Copy that, General. Aborting mission and returning to base. Through the facility's external sensors, I watched the transport convoy slow, then stop, then begin turning around. The radiation signature began moving away from our location, growing smaller with each passing minute. The immediate threat was over, but the damage was already done. I slumped against the console, my body finally succumbing to the radiation exposure and blood loss. The metallic taste in my mouth had evolved into something that felt like swallowing molten copper, and my vision was narrowing to a tunnel of fading light. "Kai," I said into the radio, "it's over. The transport is turning back. You're safe. What about you?" I looked at my radiation badge, at the blood on my hands, at the atmospheric readings that showed lethal levels of contamination throughout the facility. "I'm not going to make it out of here. We can come back for you once the medical team sets up the decontamination equipment." "No, the radiation levels are too high, but the information got out. The world will know what happened here." Through the facility's damaged windows, I could see the first hints of dawn breaking through the contaminated haze. The orange glow was fading, replaced by the natural light of a new day. It was beautiful in its way, the kind of sunrise that reminded you why life was worth fighting for. "Ivan," Kai's voice came through the radio, stronger now. "The medical team is asking about Juniper. They need to know her location for the search and rescue operation." Juniper, my sister, the EMT who had been visiting the capital when the first warhead detonated. In all the chaos of the past 6 hours, I had pushed thoughts of her to the back of my mind, focusing on the immediate crisis. But now, as the adrenaline faded and the radiation sickness advanced, her absence hit me like a physical blow. "She was in the capital," I said, my voice barely audible. "Ground Zero. She didn't make it out." The radio was silent for a long moment. Then Kai's voice, gentle and sad, "I'm sorry, Ivan. I'm so sorry." I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of helicopters approaching. Medical evacuation, not attack helicopters. The crisis was over, but the aftermath was just beginning. The uploaded data would expose the weapons program and the people responsible for it. Congressional hearings would follow. Heads would roll. Justice would be served, but Juniper would still be dead. The elderly couple in the tunnel system would still be dead. Layla would still be dead, and I would join them soon, another casualty of a conspiracy that had prioritized secrecy over human life. "Kai," I said into the radio, "make sure they remember what happened here. Make sure they remember why we did this." "I will. I promise." The helicopters were closer now, their rotors cutting through the contaminated air like thunder. I could hear voices on the radio, medical personnel coordinating the decontamination operation, military officers organizing the investigation, news reporters already asking questions about the data release. The truth was out there. The cover-up had failed. The weapons program would be exposed, and the people responsible would be held accountable. It wasn't the victory I had hoped for, but it was something. It was enough. I thought about Juniper, about the last conversation we'd had before she left for the capital. She had been excited about a new job opportunity, a chance to work with a trauma team at one of the major hospitals. She had always wanted to save lives, to make a difference in the world. In the end, she had made a difference. Her death had given me the motivation to fight back, to expose the truth, to ensure that the weapons program couldn't claim any more victims. She would never know it, but she had helped save thousands of lives. The radiation sickness was advancing rapidly now. My vision was fading, my hearing was muffled, and my body was shutting down system by system. But I could still hear the radio, still hear Kai's voice coordinating with the medical teams. 41 civilians evacuated safely, she was saying. 2 casualties in the tunnel system. 1 casualty in the facility control room. The immediate threat has been neutralized. 1 casualty in the facility control room. That was me. Ivan Petrov, nuclear engineer, killed in the line of duty while exposing a conspiracy that threatened thousands of lives. It wasn't the ending I had planned, but it was the ending I had earned. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of the helicopters, to the voices on the radio, to the hum of the facility's emergency systems. The contaminated air was thick with the smell of ozone and burning electronics, but underneath it all, I could smell something else. The clean scent of morning air, untainted by radiation or fear. The crisis was over. The truth was out. The mission was complete, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of a new day beginning. The convoy's headlights pierced the pre-dawn darkness like 3 burning needles, military vehicles racing toward the facility at reckless speeds. Through the facility's seismic sensors, I felt their approach, a rhythmic vibration that pulsed through the concrete foundation like the heartbeat of some massive beast. The lead vehicle's radiation signature registered at 12,400 Roentgens per hour, easily 3 times the output of the device that had vaporized the capital. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a city killer designed to erase every trace of what had happened here. My hands trembled as I gripped the radio, radiation poisoning having advanced to the point where my fingernails were peeling away from the nail beds in bloody strips. Black patches spread across my arms like spilled ink, and the metallic taste in my mouth had evolved into something that felt like chewing on live electrical wire. The atmospheric radiation sensor read 4,231 Roentgens per hour, exposure levels that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. "Kai," I said into the radio, my voice hoarse from chemical burns in my throat. "Status report on the civilian evacuation." Static crackled through the damaged communication array before her voice came through, strained and exhausted. 41 made it to Junction 77. We had to leave the Pattersons behind. Mr. Patterson collapsed during the evacuation, and his wife refused to abandon him. The math was brutal, Ivan. 41 lives versus 2. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of command decisions settling on my shoulders like molten lead. The elderly couple would die in the tunnel system, but their sacrifice would save dozens of others, including 7 children under the age of 10. It was the correct tactical choice, even if it would haunt Kai for the rest of her life. "Tactically sound decision," I said, watching the transport convoys approach on the facility's external sensors. 7 minutes until they reached the perimeter fence. Through the facility's cracked windows, I could see Layla's corpse slumped against the radiation-damaged concrete, her skin waxy and translucent like old parchment. Dark blood had pooled beneath her, and her radiation badge was still clipped to her suit, the magnetic stripe intact despite the lethal exposure. Before she died, she had revealed the final piece of the conspiracy. The second warhead wasn't being transported to safety. It was being brought here to complete the cover-up, to vaporize all evidence of the weapons program. But she had also mentioned something else during our initial security briefing, something I hadn't paid attention to at the time. Every experimental warhead had a remote deactivation system that could be triggered from authorized monitoring stations. The codes were classified at the highest levels, but they were stored in the facility's secure database. I crawled across the debris-strewn floor to the security console, my radiation suit leaving a dark streak of contaminated material on the concrete. The badge reader was damaged but still functional. Its red light flickered weakly as I swiped Layla's card through the slot. The screen displayed her authorization level. Level 9, all protocols accessible. Authorization accepted. I said aloud, my voice echoing in the empty control room. Initiating emergency abort sequence for transport XM-47 Alpha. The system demanded dual authorization. 2 separate codes entered simultaneously. I had my level 7 access, but I needed a second level 9 code to complete the abort sequence. The transport was 5 minutes out, moving fast through the radiation zone with complete disregard for safety protocols. I picked up the red phone and dialed the emergency number for the Pentagon's Nuclear Emergency Response Team. The line rang twice before a voice answered, "Nuclear Emergency Response. This is General Hayes. General, this is Ivan Petrov at Monitoring Facility NM7. I need immediate authorization to abort transport XM-47 Alpha. Mr. Petrov, you do not have authority to interfere with classified weapons transport. General, that transport is carrying an experimental warhead to my location for the purpose of destroying evidence. When it detonates, it'll vaporize everything within a 20-mile radius. Civilian casualties will exceed 200,000. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different, tired, defeated. Mr. Petrov, I want you to understand something. This conversation is being recorded. Your accusations constitute treason under the National Security Act, and your participation in this cover-up constitutes mass murder under any law you care to name. Through the facility's external sensors, I watched the convoy approach the final checkpoint. The lead vehicle's radiation signature was so massive it was overwhelming our detection equipment, creating interference patterns that looked like static on the monitoring screens. General, I said, my voice growing weaker as the radiation sickness advanced. I uploaded the complete weapons program database to the Associated Press 2 hours ago. The information is already public. The cover-up has failed. All you can do now is minimize the casualties. You did what? Everything. The transport routes, the authorization codes, the names of everyone who signed off on moving experimental warheads through populated areas. It's all public record now. The New York Times, Washington Post, and Reuters have copies. There was a long silence. Then, Alpha Charlie 77 Tango. I entered the authorization code into the abort protocol system with trembling fingers. The screen flashed green, and the emergency transmission began broadcasting on the transport's command frequency. Transport XM-47 Alpha. This is Facility NM7 with abort authorization Alpha Charlie 77 Tango. You are ordered to cease movement and await further instructions. The radio crackled with the transport team's response. Facility NM7. This is Transport XM-47 Alpha. We cannot comply with abort order. Our instructions come directly from the Pentagon. Transport XM-47 Alpha. This is General Hayes. I am ordering you to abort your mission and return to base immediately. General Hayes, we need confirmation of that order from command authority. I looked at the radiation readings on my atmospheric sensor. The transport was now close enough that its cargo was registering maximum values on our detection equipment, a signature that dwarfed anything I'd ever seen. The device wasn't just designed to destroy evidence. It was built to sterilize the entire area, ensuring that no trace of the weapons program would survive. General, I said into the red phone, confirm the abort order. It's over. Her voice was barely a whisper. Transport XM-47 Alpha. This is General Hayes. Abort your mission. Return to base immediately. Copy that, General. Aborting mission and returning to base. Through the facility's external sensors, I watched the transport convoy slow, then stop, then begin turning around. The radiation signature began moving away from our location, growing smaller with each passing minute. The immediate threat was over. I slumped against the console, my body finally succumbing to the radiation exposure. The metallic taste in my mouth had evolved into something that felt like swallowing molten copper, and my vision was narrowing to a tunnel of fading light. "Kai," I said into the radio, "it's over. The transport is turning back. You're safe. What about you?" I looked at my radiation badge, at the blood on my hands, at the atmospheric readings that showed lethal levels of contamination throughout the facility. "I'm not going to make it out of here. We can come back for you once the medical team sets up the decontamination equipment." "No, the radiation levels are too high, but the information got out. The world will know what happened here." Through the facility's damaged windows, I could see the first hints of dawn breaking through the contaminated haze. The orange glow was fading, replaced by the natural light of a new day. Medical helicopters were approaching from the safe zone, their rotors cutting through the contaminated air like thunder. "Ivan," Kai's voice came through the radio, stronger now. "The medical team is asking about Juniper. They need to know her location for the search and rescue operation." Juniper, my sister, the EMT who had been visiting the capital when the first warhead detonated. In all the chaos of the past 8 hours, I had pushed thoughts of her to the back of my mind, focusing on the immediate crisis. But now, as the adrenaline faded and the radiation sickness advanced, her absence hit me like a physical blow. "She was in the capital," I said, my voice barely audible. "Ground Zero. She didn't make it out." The radio was silent for a long moment. Then Kai's voice, gentle and sad, "I'm sorry, Ivan. I'm so sorry." I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of helicopters approaching. Medical evacuation, not attack helicopters. The crisis was over, but the aftermath was just beginning. The uploaded data would expose the weapons program and the people responsible for it. Congressional hearings would follow. Heads would roll. Justice would be served, but Juniper would still be dead. The elderly couple in the tunnel system would still be dead. Layla would still be dead, and I would join them soon, another casualty of a conspiracy that had prioritized secrecy over human life. "Kai," I said into the radio, "make sure they remember what happened here. Make sure they remember why we did this." "I will. I promise." The helicopters were closer now, their rotors cutting through the contaminated air. I could hear voices on the radio, medical personnel coordinating the decontamination operation, military officers organizing the investigation, news reporters already asking questions about the data release. The truth was out there. The cover-up had failed. The weapons program would be exposed, and the people responsible would be held accountable. It wasn't the victory I had hoped for, but it was something. It was enough. I thought about Juniper, about the last conversation we'd had before she left for the capital. She had been excited about a new job opportunity, a chance to work with a trauma team at one of the major hospitals. She had always wanted to save lives, to make a difference in the world. In the end, she had made a difference. Her death had given me the motivation to fight back, to expose the truth, to ensure that the weapons program couldn't claim any more victims. She would never know it, but she had helped save thousands of lives. The radiation sickness was advancing rapidly now. My vision was fading, my hearing was muffled, and my body was shutting down system by system. But I could still hear the radio, still hear Kai's voice coordinating with the medical teams. 41 civilians evacuated safely, she was saying. 2 casualties in the tunnel system. 1 casualty in the facility control room. The immediate threat has been neutralized. 1 casualty in the facility control room. That was me. Ivan Petrov, nuclear engineer, killed in the line of duty while exposing a conspiracy that threatened thousands of lives. It wasn't the ending I had planned, but it was the ending I had earned. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of the helicopters, to the voices on the radio, to the hum of the facility's emergency systems. The contaminated air was thick with the smell of ozone and burning electronics, but underneath it all, I could smell something else. The clean scent of morning air, untainted by radiation or fear. The crisis was over. The truth was out. The mission was complete, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of a new day beginning.